Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. The ticket sales, StubHub's college football ticket sales are up 42% year to year. So one of the things I bang on, and I'm going to bring in my guest, Greg McElroy, the host of Always College Football, former Bama quarterback, 2010 national champ. One of the things I bang on consistently in my audience is the sky is falling. I see it in politics. You know, if you elect Kamala Harris, we'll go into anarchy. Venezuela. It's like, it's conspiracy theories. The world's ending. And I kept saying on the 12-team playoff and the NIL and the transfer portal, college football will be different. It'll be magnificent. It'll still be lopsided. The big dogs will still have the best rosters, but it'll look a little different. It'll end differently. It's going to be fine. So the audience, the consumer is telling you, Greg, we're more excited for college football than ever. In the South, where you have your footprint, there was a lot of consternation about change because the SEC was king, and you worry about the Texas money and the Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame money. What is the sense about NIL, transfer portal, 12-team playoff as of today in the South?
Well, it's still actually really well received, Colin. I mean, the thing about the SEC is they still are going to have more access to talent just because of just sheer proximity. And while I've used this analogy a couple times, the alumni network is not nearly as big as that of an Ohio State, where they have 1 million living alumni, 60,000 undergrad for the last 100 years, however many years it's been. The level of intensity and passion that we have in the southeastern part of the United States for the sport and for the teams is unrivaled. So while you make 100, I make 100, you live in Los Angeles, I live in Birmingham, Alabama, I'm going to give $22 out of the 100 to Alabama because that's the team I support, whereas you might give 11. Right. It's just kind of the way things have worked, but for all intents and purposes, it's kind of been viewed as a personal challenge to the teams in the Southeast to step up from an NIL standpoint, compete with the big dogs, and even if they don't have the deepest pockets, they have access to the most players. And then the portal, when guys might leave for the big payday as a freshman, when they go in the portal after year one, they might be more likely to come back home at their second stop. So a lot of programs have taken that route as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things to talk about. I've said that we need to temper not only expectations, but criticism of coaches when they go to schools. Look how long it took Dabo Swinney or Jim Harbaugh. So when Harbaugh and Lincoln Riley are interesting comps. So we know they're both good coaches. Nobody disputes that. Jim had a longer resume. And obviously, the transfer portal is a more vigorous. I mean, there were people transferring 10 years ago, but not to the level now, the machine it is.
Right.
And I said, but if you really look at Brian Kelly and Harbaugh, you know, they doubled the wins very quickly. But it was sort of pseudo, can't compete with Alabama, Georgia, but they won the games they should have won. And Brian Kelly gets to a natty and gets blown out. And Michigan, you know, would face Ohio State, and it was fool's gold. It took both about 8 years to stockpile talent where they could play a Georgia, Bama, and the games are good. And you could, on television, you're like, oh, there's pros on both sides. You know, the Manti Te'o Notre Dame team in the national championship, you know, it felt like it would have finished third in the Pac-12. But a lot of it's scheduling. So I say with Lincoln Riley, as bad as Notre Dame was and Michigan was, I don't think they were as bad as USC under Clay Helton. Not only were they 4-8, but people inside the program believed they only had like 12 NFL, maybe late round players. That it was Lincoln Riley identified after 2 practices, there's maybe 30 guys we can keep. Yeah. And so by being a play away from 12 wins in his first season was fairly remarkable for those of us closer to the program. And then the second year, they had injuries. Jordan Addison was gone. And frankly, they're just no NFL players. It was Caleb. And they kind of shut him down once they lost a couple of games. They had a defensive coordinator completely over his skis. So my takeaway is this idea that USC was going to vie for national championships, they were way better year one than expectations. That's not really who they were. They were an early Notre Dame or Harbaugh team. Harbaugh got from 5 to 10 wins year one. They weren't a national championship team. USC couldn't beat any good teams. They were just beating the crappy teams on their schedule because of the wizardry of Caleb and the coaching of Lincoln. So my take is, I think we're being too unrealistic, even with the transfer portal, to Brian Kelly right now in Lincoln, in that the sport still comes down to high school recruiting and chemistry and culture, and you can't do it in 2 years. Your thoughts?
The problem is you've had guys that have ruined it for everybody. The Josh Heupels of the world, that in year one, progress, year two, game changer, right? Yeah. We've seen it with Urban Meyer. His second year at Florida, I believe they won the national championship. And we've seen it a handful of other times. Nick Saban at Alabama, 2007, 7-6. 2008, 12-0 with a chance in the lead in the fourth quarter to go to the national title. So, yeah, you're right. In normal circumstances, I think it takes 4 years to get a real evaluation on the trajectory of your team. That's my personal opinion. I understand that big dollars are in play here. And also, along with, I think, tempers flare and egos are involved, and the collective doesn't feel like they're getting what they have paid for. Right. They're going to be quicker to pull the trigger. But at the same time, I completely agree with you. And those that have said that Lincoln Riley he doesn't know what he's doing. He's way out of his, so far. I saw an analyst, a national analyst, Colin, the other day say, oh, his tenure at SC has been a, quote, disaster. Well, to be a win away from the college football playoff in year one with the Heisman Trophy winner, sign me up for that disaster most of the week.
Two NFL players. One of them, Caleb, is a sophomore. I mean, that team had no talent.
Well, and he did a great job with them. The one thing that does concern me, and I've known Lincoln, when I was a commit to Texas Tech, Lincoln picked me up at the airport. I've known him for 20 years. So it's a little bit close to home with me, and followed him to his years at East Carolina, followed him in his time at, obviously, Oklahoma. So I'm wanting what's best for him as a fan of his and as a fan of the sport. I think it's great when SC's relevant. So I acknowledge all that he's done offensively, but I don't know, this is my observation from a distance, I don't know if they practice the way they need to practice to be as good along both lines of scrimmage to compete for championships. And that's the only question I have. And will he be too proud to adjust maybe the amount of full contact periods that they have? Will they maybe do some things offensively in a drill setting that might give the defense a slight advantage? Will they do things like that to help attract more defensive personnel and to create a tougher, more physical mindset? Because I saw last year they were a little banged up in spring. This was spring of 23. They said after like 9 practices, yeah, we're good. We're just going to do, walkthroughs or whatever. At Georgia, they're like, I don't care if we have managers putting helmets on, we're practicing. So I think that's the mindset that I'm just a little concerned about. Sure. But I think the jury's out right now, and I'm actually really optimistic about SC this year more than most, Colin, to be completely honest.
They get a schedule break. No Oregon and Ohio State. Michigan in a total rebuild. Same with Washington, and LSU lost Jaden Daniels. That's the loss on their schedule. Everything else is winnable. Their only cold weather game is first week in November in Seattle, and I'm from there. You may get a sunny 64-degree day. I mean, seriously, you don't know what you're getting until Thanksgiving. So they got a scheduling break. Ohio State and Oregon are clearly the best 2 teams. I think Penn State's third in the Big Ten. And they get Penn State at home, by the way. They get Notre Dame at home. So they got a huge, it's almost like the conference said, let's give them a break as Lincoln Riley builds up. So they got a huge scheduling break. So I don't think 8 or 9 are out of the question, but I don't think they're in the same class as Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Bama. I don't even know if they're in the same class as Missouri. I think Iowa's better than people think. I think Utah's actually good. Ole Miss is excellent. I don't know. But I guess my pushback is, if you go back to the first year, folks, they were a play from 12 wins with 2 NFL players. And that was, if you recall, the last 2 years have been, by Pac-12 historical standards, the conference was about as good as it's been. Our basketball school Arizona won 7 straight to end the season, beat Oklahoma. Like, we're not the SEC. It was really good by Pac-12 standards. We had like Oregon State was viable.
Right.
So
no question.
Yeah.
But I'm with you though. I am curious though, what does success look like in year 3? Because I look at what was lost with Caleb Williams. And well, I think Caleb Williams was the ultimate neutralizer.
Yeah.
If there was a talent advantage on the other side, like Caleb could elevate and neutralize that talent. But oftentimes he played so much out of the system. And this is not a negative. I mean, he improvised so much and he just didn't really stay true to what made Lincoln Riley an 8-figure a year head coach. I think that's going to be okay with Miller Moss. Or there's buzz about Mayava having really good and having some momentum. I'm not buying it, but I still think with that weaponry, I think they have 4 game changers at wide receiver, all sophomores, I might add. I really like SC's personnel offensively, and I think it will allow Lincoln's exo acumen to shine this year, as opposed to just seeing Caleb run around and create magic the last 2 seasons.
Hey, football fans, if you're looking to dominate your fantasy league next year, then we've got the channel for you. From the NFL Draft through training camp and Week 1 to Super Bowl Sunday, Fantasy Pros is the home of football content you cannot afford to miss. Subscribe today, and your team will be in championship form in no time.
It's like I have a source inside USC football.
No, there's no way. I'm shocked to hear that. Based on how much insider information you have.
You have literally touched on something that is the great unspoken with the program, is that they played actually in more structure in Caleb's first year.
Right.
By the second year, injuries to the O-line, Lincoln got very tentative once the national championship playoff was out to get Caleb hurt. And frankly, he felt he almost owed it to Caleb. He got a Heisman. He didn't want to get him hurt. They didn't trust the offensive line. And it became kind of an ad-libby offense in the last 3 or 4 starts for Caleb. And there are people that have told me it'll go back to being Lincoln Riley's offense. Yeah. It was the first year with Caleb and parts of the second. It sort of dovetailed, and it's not a criticism of Caleb. It's they didn't want to get him hurt. They didn't trust the O-line. They didn't call stuff because they didn't want to put him in a bad spot. And it really became there was a backyard feel to a lot of what SC was doing. And Lincoln felt he lost the offense a little. So Miller Moss at the Holiday Bowl ran Lincoln's offense and looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I think to your point, you're literally touching on, so that's why you're so connected. You're really touching on something that in the program, there's a feeling that Miller's going to play the tempo. It won't look like Oregon, Dan Lanning and Bo Nix, where it's like, like they're dialing up where to go. It won't be quite that, because I do think they have really good young perimeter talent. But it'll be Lincoln's team. I'll give you an example. In the NFL, when Aaron Rodgers was there with young Matt LaFleur, it was kind of Aaron's offense, right?
Completely.
If you watch them last year with Jordan Love, it was the first time I had said this on the air that I watched the Packers and thought, oh, that's Matt LaFleur's offense.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And it's not a knock on Aaron, but superstar quarterbacks are going to blow off the coach. They're going to go in the huddle, roll the eyes. Sometimes for self-preservation, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You wouldn't do that with Saban.
No.
But that happens more than people think, and I think it happened at SC. That's my point. Throw another shrimp on the Barbie. Get in on UFC 305 live from the land down under. This is going to be fun at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. The middleweight title is on the line for the main event. I go to UFC cards 4 or 5 live every year, especially in the summer. And in the fall, I buy them. The card is stacked full of, as it says here, blokes and Sheilas. Speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, sign up, go to the app. It's real simple. Put in the code Colin, COLIN. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. UFC is so much fun to watch. Just incredible intensity. Put $5-10 on the line. All right, the code is Colin. New customers, $150. You get it instantly, betting just $5. Okay, UFC 305 middleweight title on the line, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
It's a completely fair assessment. But tell me this, if you're Caleb Williams, are you going to hand it off in an RPO? Probably not. Why would I? We're better with the ball in my hands. I think I'll just I'll take this thing over and we'll see where we go.